Today's fly is Keith's Bay Whistler. It was originally designed by a captain here in Sarasota by the name of Keith Tennant. I've been tying it for quite a few years. It's great for snook and trout, redfish. Hits the water fairly light, but it still sinks. It's much like a seaducer. We get to work with chartreuse dyed grizzly feathers, neck feathers, body fur by Rumpf, which is a synthetic, mini lead eyes, and I'm using chartreuse and red Flymaster Plus thread to tie it. The hook is a Dairiki 930, which is the same as a Mustad 34007. We're using size 4. To get started, we're going to wrap all the way back down the shank to right where it bends. Now I'm going to thread forward just slightly. Now we're going to bring in 2 sets of 2 chartreuse grizzly feathers and match them up. This is going to be splayed, by the way. Get them lined up with each other. This is going to be approximately 1.5 to 2 times the length of the hook. I'm going to cut this off, knock out all the excess fuzz. Now, one of the things that a lot of feather tiers try, or when you're trying to tie feathers, is you grab this right, clear back here. That's not a good thing. You want to capture right at the tips. These are nice loose wraps. I'm going to do about forward, kind of work my way back. I can adjust now, and as you can see, they're splayed. Now, instead of doing the pull down on the thread, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to pull up. That way they don't tend to roll over the top of the hook. Put a few more tight wraps. And those are all set. Now, the important thing is, little days, flex them in. Keep your glue really thin. Get them glued down. I use chartreuse colored Opal Mirage Flash accent. It's a little brighter than the normal Flashaboo. I'm using 1 strand cut in half. I'm going to fold that across the hook, or across the thread. And I'm going to bring it in so 2 strands are on your side and 2 strands are on my side. Get that tied in. Okay. Now comes the body fur. Now you can see this stuff is a belted synthetic. It's got synthetic fibers and flash in it, and you can see this is kind of a mess. If you just get it lined up so it's all on one side, kind of untwist it, and then just give it a little pull, it'll kind of starch it so it's all on one side of the. Turn that end off. Now I'm going to lay this in and tie it down, and then move on forward with my thread. Now I have a nice rotary vise, but that's not the way to lay this stuff down. You got to do it by hand, otherwise it just ends up being a mess. And you want the wraps to be, the belt literally to be on top of itself. I'm going to lay another little gob of glue down. And I'm going to wrap this 3 times. Okay. 1, kind of picking it out as I go. 2. And 3. And I'm going to back up with my thread. And I'm going to put it right in between the material. Tie that belt down. 3 nice tight wraps there. Trim off the excess. And then do some finishing wraps. Okay, you can see what this looks like. Next step is a mini lead eye. I'm going to lay this in at a 45-degree angle to the hook. I'm going to wrap one direction. Oops. About 6 wraps. Now, it's sitting at a 45-degree angle like this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reach around, I'm going to pull it square with the hook, and then I'm going to wrap the other direction. It makes a really tight wrap for the lead eyes. And you can see those are square now. Okay, I'm going to finish by putting a little bit more thread on the front. Build up that chartreuse color. And I'm going to whip finish. Excuse me, I'm right-handed. When I whip finish, okay, now I'm going to come in with some red thread. That gap that's in between the lead eye and the body fur has always kind of bothered me. It's hard to get the lead eye to sit right up on top when there's kind of a little slope from your thread. So I fill this in with red thread. Just give it a kind of a gill, give it a little bit of an aesthetic. Whip finish that. Cut off my excess. Okay, this fly is basically done. I'm going to put a little more Flexament in there. Kind of glue everything down nice and tight. The very last step for this fly is once this Dave's Flexament dries, you want a good glossy coat. I've used Hardest Hull, I've used Sally Hansen's Hardest Nails, I've used Loon Hardhead clear fly finish. There's a big difference between that and the Dave's Flexament. The Dave's Flexament is for tying. It's for tying and gluing everything down to the hook. But the finish coat gives it that nice glossy finish like epoxy. You can epoxy these too, but that's really all there is to it. And as you can see, it didn't take very long at all. It's a nice quick fly, lightly weighted, so it does sink a little bit, but it looks a little bit like a seaducer, barring the fact that this is the body fur is synthetic. It works great in shallows, and you got to finish it a little bit slower as you would with any seaducer, but it's a great little fly.